Welcome back, Honors. Yeah, so it's been a long break. It's been really nice though. I know I enjoyed it. So your two flips are upcoming right now, and then you'll have another one on the Monday we get back, and that'll wrap up all the exploration stuff. Now remember, we're not testing on the exploration stuff. We're just writing a DBQ for it, and that'll be like your exploration test, right? And then we're going to move into absolutism, and then the French Revolution and the Enlightenment, and then we're going to move into nationalism and imperialism, and then wrap up with World War One, and then that's going to be on your final. So you have about 3 more tests coming down the pipe, okay? So some are like, how are we going to ever get that done? The next unit is super short, and the CP kids just finished it up, and trust me, it doesn't take much time at all. Now, anyway, let's keep going though, okay? So, going forward, we stopped right here. The Encomienda system was the system that, well, let's recap a little bit. So we talked about how the embargoes are going to be created on the Spanish colonies, right? We talked about how the big crop was sugarcane, right? We talked about how the processing and the raw materials of all these goods was the major import by all these European powers. Well, the thing about it is that when Spain became the most powerful and most profitable country in all of Europe during this time period, it's mainly due to one huge fact. And that huge fact has to do with the fact, wow, I just said fact like 4 times. So it's mainly because of the Encomienda system, okay? The Encomienda system was a system of forced labor, all right? Now, some of y'all are immediately saying slavery. Now, no, that's different. Slavery requires like an investment, all right? You have to purchase slaves. You have to, it's an economic model, right? The plantation model is an economic model. The Encomienda model is the idea enforced by the Spanish to force not slaves to work, but natives, okay? So put natives under there. So it's a system of forced labor on the natives, simply due to the fact that slaves were very expensive. You don't have to write that down. But the Spanish economy is going to save money by instating the Encomienda. And the Encomienda is going to give the right to force natives to work by law, all right? If natives refused, the conquistadors had full right to hunt them down and kill them. Sometimes they would go after their families first, local tribes, things like that. But yeah, like it was a very intense system, right? The Encomienda system saved them a ridiculous amount of money because the natives were forced to work with absolutely no pay, no compensation, right? They were like, all right, natives, keep living your regular lives, but every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you had to be here and you had to be working on these plantations or somewhere even scarier. All right, so anyway, so this is what the Encomienda system looked like in the plantation model. They're planting sugarcane right here. You can see that the Encomienda server right here is the white guy with the whip, and then the natives are the ones actually being forced to work, right? Now, this contradicts what you learn in like middle school and elementary school, because ironically enough, this is a very simple context to teach. I don't know why that people don't bring it up, but it's a system of forced labor amongst the natives that actually saved the Spanish economy a lot of money, right? So it's also going to actually effectively create the newest race of people on the planet, but we'll get to that later. Now, going forward though, the natives are going to work mainly in 2 places, the mines and on the plantations. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if I had to pick one, I'm definitely going plantation because the mines would scare the ever-loving daylights out of me. Not to mention the fact that the mines killed thousands more people than the plantations ever did, right? The natives died in the mines due to poor conditions, exhaustion, no ventilation, a lot of different stuff. Speaking of the ventilation stuff, they would actually use children to open ventilation windows. So what they would have is like the mine shaft would be dug down right here, and then at the bottom of a large pit, there would be a fire. And then at the top of the ground, there would be windows that had to be opened or shafts that had to be opened to allow the hot air to rise out, and it would pull fresh air in the front of the mine, right? It's a very ingenious system. But the thing about it is that the kids that would be opening these ventilation windows were perched on a ledge right above the fire so they could easily fall into it, right? Yeah, that's pretty terrible, right? So native children would also be used as well to go into small holes in the mines and actually drag out large carts of bullion, which is actually processed gold. So gold, even in a sense, I guess could be considered the raw material. But they're dragging out the raw, like the rock and the stuff that had to be smelted out, right? So this right here is a young native boy that's actually dragging this thing out, right? So as you can see, very cramped conditions. They didn't have electricity, so they actually had to use candles in these shafts, which is extremely frightening. So I'm pretty confident I used the wrong dyeing right there, and I used the dyeing that makes it sound like they're dyeing them colors, which is really screwed up. Now, the dyeing natives are going to cause a labor shortage, though, okay? So the Encomienda system wasn't built to last. It was built to make a lot of money up front, right? Because if they wanted to invest money on keeping these natives healthy, they would have been losing money in the long run, right? So the Spanish are then going to begin to bring in slaves from Africa in huge amounts, right? Most of these slaves are actually going to pass through the Caribbean, which is going to be why, again, they were going to be called the Sugar Islands. And a lot of slaves are going to be there, and there are also a lot of African descendant people still live there. Jamaica, for example, was a major slave colony port. And now, predominantly, the people that live there are African American. Or not African American, that would mean they were American. They're African descendant, all right? So, anyway. But they're going to be brought in huge, huge numbers, okay? Literally by, I think it's 1880, 11 million slaves had reached North and South America. 11 million. In that process, 2 million had actually died en route. So, continuing forward, though, colonial society and culture, all right? We're going to get into the slave labor stuff on Monday, okay? So, colonial society and culture. Cultural diffusion is going to begin to do a lot of different things. It's going to begin to blend native society with the Spanish. Cities and towns are going to begin to grow and include homes, markets, government buildings, harbors, right? They're not going to create colonies simply to be raw material exporting areas. They're actually going to grow a society, a colonial society at that. So social classes are going to begin to develop. And also the crazy thing about the Spanish ones is that a lot of races are going to begin to mix together. Now, this is very important when we get to Latin America, when they get to their liberation movements, right? But to give you a heads up, and I put stars next to these because it's very, very important that you remember it now, mestizo is when a new class of people that popped up during this time period. It's when a native and a European would actually mix together. And then mulattoes was when an African and a European mixed together, right? So, and created families. So they weren't persecuted as much as you would think they were, but at the same time, they weren't given the same amount of rights as everybody else was, okay? So let's keep rolling, though. Now, getting after it, now we got to talk about these two areas. We got to talk about how France and England are going to affect everything, right? So, anyway, the struggles for North America are going to pop up as well. Because the Spanish and the Portuguese are going to focus mostly on tropical, very, very arid, very, very warm climate areas so they can actually grow certain crops and also stick to where they believe that they can actually mine gold and silver, right? That's mostly in Central and South America. Other Europeans, though, had eyes on North America, right? So they're going to get involved in the game way late, about 100 years after the Spanish do. But a lot of this had to do with the Spanish are eventually going to reach a limit that they can't keep pushing even further because they won't have the personnel to actually hold it up. So the North American countries, though, are particularly France and England, right? So building a new France, though, is going to be a difficult task because by the mid-1550s, the French are going to occupy nearly half of North America, all right? So the French actually came in through Canada first, right? The French put their main focus in Canada, which they called New France, all right? They put their main focus in Canada due to one or two particular industries, all right? So due to, here we go, bang. The French population is going to grow very, very slowly, all right? And mainly, they didn't have a lot of very large settlements because their main source of revenue was two things, where they would actually import-export. The harbors were really the only things they worked out. So rough, they didn't really support a stable, growing colonial society, right? The only area of French colonialism that actually popped up and was very, very beefy was like in Louisiana and the Mississippi River Valley, right? Now, write that down. The French are going to literally use the Mississippi River to colonize their entire colonial empire, right? So they're going to go all the way down the Mississippi River, okay? Now, the French population is going to grow very, very slowly. Didn't have a lot of very large settlements. A lot of it's due to the climate. The main source of revenue was furs and fishing, right? So there's actually a French East India Company as well that is going to be very, very big into fur trapping, right? Now, a lot of it's mainly in the use of beavers because they had never seen a beaver before. And beaver's fur is actually kind of waterproof. So they would use it to create boots and a lot of different things like that. Now, eventually stretch from Canada all the way down the Mississippi and into Louisiana. So they're going to stop, though, because right around the Appalachian Mountains, because there's somebody else on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains that's colonizing that area. And that's the English, right? And the English are creating their 13 English colonies over on the right. I'm going to put a list on my board on Monday, okay? beginning from when the class comes in on the bell, not like the actual day of school, right? When you're on your way to your class, first 13 kids come in and write a colony up there. Ooh, actually 14, because Maine's not a colony. It was actually a part of a different colony. So I'll put a star at the end of the list, and I'll put, like, you just got to write the colony that Maine was a part of, okay? So 14 kids, it's half of you, had the ability to come in, write a colony up on the board, okay? One of the 13 ones. So the first permanent colony in Jamestown, Virginia, notice I said permanent because I'm not actually discussing Roanoke, right? So anyway, well, the Roanoke colony was in 1604. And that one was the Lost Colony. It wasn't permanent because when Sir Walter Raleigh actually settled the Roanoke colony in Roanoke, North Carolina, the colony actually disappeared. We have no clue what happened to it. Sir Walter Raleigh left to go get more supplies for this colony, and then in about a year he came back and everybody was gone, and he has no idea where they went. But also, crazy thing though, is one of the only evidences that was actually left behind. Well, the homes were completely intact. They didn't find any human remains. They actually done sweeps of the Lost Colony area, and they still can't find any human remains. We believe, though, that the Native Americans probably came in and took them over because the word Croatan was carved into a tree. All right, so, but the first permanent colony, and you need to write it next to this right here, it's a joint stock colony, is Jamestown, Virginia, right, 1607. James. We haven't talked about him yet, but we will, all right? It's called Jamestown because that was the current king of England at the time, James Stewart I, all right? So, anyway, he's the guy that follows Elizabeth. Now, but the first permanent colony was in Jamestown, Virginia. It's a joint stock colony. The joint stock colony means that a lot of independent business owners came in and invested in it together, okay? And they would reap the benefits on it proportionally due to how much money came off the colony, right? Now, the settlers would never have survived without the aid of the Native Americans. Oh, the ultimate, the ultimate poetic irony. Tragic irony, actually. So, they're going to help them survive. And this is the Powhatan Indians that are going to help them survive. Now, the Native Americans, though, are going to basically help them get through a period called the Starving Times. Now, the Starving Times were from 1609 to 1610. It was during the winters when the people in Jamestown literally almost died, all right? So, like, all of them anyway. They were literally starving. They ate things like the following. You should write these down just because they're fun. They'll probably be extra credit on the test. Ate things like the following. Shoe leather. There isn't going to be a test for this unit, but still, it's cool enough. Shoe leather, tree bark, and we have literal evidence of cannibalism, right? So, there's this woman, and they call her Jamestown Jane. You can look her up. Jamestown Jane's got these tool marks on her skull right here due to what we believe of people coming up and peeling the skin off of her face to, like, eat it and stuff because they were starving that bad, right? But the Native Americans are going to come in and show them how to plant corn, how to fertilize with dead fish, which is a really, really cool thing. And the colony is going to find its money also in one particular item that's going to make these joint stock owners a lot of money, and that is in, drumroll please, tobacco, right? So tobacco was the major export of the Jamestown colony. So, now, tobacco was being used by this point, but not in as much proliferation until the Jamestown colony came along, okay? So, we'll talk about how rich people use tobacco in a little, and when we get back to class on Monday, just ask me about it and I'll let you know. So, the Pilgrims are going to land in Plymouth, though. Now, all of you should immediately cross the words Pilgrims out of these notes, just because I hate that word, all right? They are separatists, all right? So, the Pilgrims are not really Pilgrims. Okay, so the big thing about it is when you're in like 4th grade, everybody's always like, why did the Americas become colonized by the English? Oh, Jimmy in the corner, religious freedom. Good job, Jimmy. Now draw a hand turkey. All right, like, so Pilgrims is a crappy way of referring to these people because they're called Pilgrims because apparently they were coming for religious freedom, but they're separatists. They're Puritans at that. They're a type of English Calvinist. All right. Now, the separatist Puritans were actually asked to leave England because no one liked them, all right? So the Puritans are going to be pushed out of England due to the fact that they were constantly having an uproar in England trying to protest the Anglican Church, trying to tell them they were too Catholic, trying to purify the Anglican Church of all of its Catholic ideas, which is why they're called Puritans, right? So They're, however, going to land, so I'd call them the Separatists, or the Puritans, right? They're going to land in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1610, right? We know this because of Plymouth Rock. If you ever go see Plymouth Rock, it's literally only about this big. And the only reason it's important is because it has the number 1610 chiseled into it. It's so lame. It's like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You can do without it, all right? So the Pilgrims, though, are English Protestants. They're looking for religious freedom. Now, anyway, they're also super sexist. They're also not very nice to their kids. They're also really mean to everyone and banish all their people to, well, that's not figurative. They banish everyone they don't like to Rhode Island. Jerks. All right, anyway, so moving forward, though, the Separatists are also going to survive with the aid of the natives and the strong government established by the Mayflower Compact. Now, the Mayflower Compact is a really cool thing because it's the very, very first time that a government was ever attempted in North America, all right? Because they were the first large settlements in North America. Mayflower Compact was literally a document set up by these little weirdos that you had in a coloring book, right? Try putting a cage around her face because that's what they thought was okay. Was an agreement that set down rule in the colony of Plymouth. And what it set up was a religious panel, and it usually always had a leader or a figurehead at the middle of it. The first guy's name was John Winthrop, all right? So John Winthrop was the very, very first one, and he actually banished a lady out named Anne Hutchinson and sent her to Rhode Island like a jerk because she was like, hey, maybe the Bible isn't meant to be completely literal, and he freaked out and banished her and her kids to Rhode Island with Roger Williams. But it's okay because Providence is a really cool town if you ever get a chance to go see it. So anyway, the English colonies, though, are going to begin to grow, all right? They're going to grow, and they're going to set up 13 different settlements stretching from over New York. That's a terrible way to look at it. From Maine all the way down to Georgia, all right? Now, the southern colonies are going to grow very fast. They're going to be separated into 3 sections. There's the New England colonies, there's the middle colonies, and then there's the southern colonies. And the southern colonies are going to grow very, very fast in wealth due to their high agricultural output. The middle colonies are going to grow decently fast because of the Quakers and a lot of the breadbasket ideas of growing grains and things like that, which is what they sold. The New England colonies are going to grow slowest, however, due to the fact that their industries were shipbuilding, fishing, some fur trapping, and also the environment just wasn't very, very beneficial for growing anything. So the colonies grew really, really slowly. All right, so the governing of the colonies was really, really big, though, because the colonies are going to be governed by their European founders. All right, so they still were under the rule of the well, not even necessarily the constitutional monarchies, but the monarchies from which they came, okay? So governors were appointed to rule the colonies, which they then reported back to the monarchs, all right? These people had to pay taxes back to the founding countries and things like that, mainly to support the military efforts, right? Getting to that, we're going to talk about struggles for power really quick, right? So struggles for power are going to break out, and the very, very first, this is the last thing you have to write down for this flip, the very first international war is going to break out. This should be considered World War I, right? Europeans are going to dispute over land for future colonies, right? A lot of this has to do with, you can write it down right here, the Appalachian Mountains. And a lot of y'all are going to be like, it's Appalachian. No, it's not, all right? We have the university in North Carolina, and people in North Carolina say Appalachian, so we're right. All right, anyway. So, the French and Indian War is going to start as France and England battle for land in America. But it's mainly because the Appalachian Mountains turns into this disputed territory, right? There's a lot of Cherokee natives up there. There's a lot of natives as well, period, that are living there because they're being pushed out by the English, right? Now, the French are growing from the Mississippi eastward, and the mountain chain of the Appalachian becomes the disputed territory, right? So, the French win over the Native Americans instead. They say, if you can help us boot out the English, we'll give you huge swaths of land that we'll never touch, right? So they actually had the French won. The natives might not have been persecuted as badly, but probably would have been persecuted just as badly because, let's be honest, do you think the French would have stopped eventually? Probably not. Now, England is going to battle with France for war, and the conflict is going to spread all over the world, which is why it should be considered World War I, and why World War II should be considered World War III, and why Nostradamus is wrong. All right, anyway, take that, Mr. Salamito. Now, fighting would occur in Europe, Africa, and even in India. All right, so the British are going to take Canada from the French when they win. Okay, so the British are actually going to win this war. Write that down in there somewhere. British are victorious. They're going to strip most of Canada away from France. The Treaty of Paris is going to end the conflict and ensure British dominance of North America. All right, and the French are going to only be given stuff west of the Mississippi. So very, very cool stuff. That's it for this flip. Now we're going to jump over to your next flip, and we're going to talk about economic struggles of global contact. All right, so anyway,